As you can see on the screen, there is a number that needs to be called in, so do that if you haven't. All right, just a couple of quick housekeeping items for anyone who has not been on a webinar before. If you keep moving your screen, your mouse or touching your space bar, that will keep your screensaver from coming on so that you won't miss any of the slideshow. We will be taking questions. You can ask the questions through the menu bar, and we will be addressing the questions at the end of the presentation just to make sure that we don't already cover your question throughout the presentation. There is, you probably can see the menu bar, the large menu bar for your webinar up in the right-hand corner of your screen. And if that's blocking your screen, you can move that by touching that red arrow, and that will move it out of your way. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please call the 800 number on your screen. It's 1-800-263-6317, and that is the number for GoToWebinar, and they'll be able to help you out. Okay, and here, this is the menu screen that you should be seeing, just so you know. Here's the red button you can press to move your menu, and here's where you can ask any questions. There's a small box for questions, and if you click on the little plus sign, it'll open this up. You type your question in, and you can either send it privately or you can send to everyone on the webinar so that they can see. That's completely up to you. All right, thank you for joining us today. My name is Shelley Rushi, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director here at Allied. And our presenter today is Joe DeFranco with Construction Safety Experts, and he's going to be presenting on the OSHA changes in signal person requirements. And we know this is a really important topic to you guys. We've had a tremendous response to this webinar, so you know, we know that this is a big deal. There's some really important information, and we're looking forward to presenting you with everything that you need to know. And just so you guys know, you can hear us. You'll be able to hear myself and Joe, but we won't be able to hear you. So if there's a phone ringing in the back or someone is talking to you in your office, don't worry about it. That's not going to interrupt anything. We do want to make sure that if you have questions on this, that you ask them through that box, because there's so much information on this. We don't want anyone to leave without having their question answered today. So I'm very happy that Joe's joining us today. He has hosted webinars for us before. Some of you may have attended our Powerline Safety webinar. So we know that he's going to be able to give you some great information. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to also welcome everyone to today's presentation. This is Joe DeFranco. I'm with Construction Safety Experts. We offer a wide variety of safety training and inspection services, and we happen to do quite a bit of work in the crane and rigging industry. And today we would like to focus on the new federal crane standard and the significant updates and changes to signal person requirements. In essence, that signal person is directing the movement of the crane. So the crane operator is going to follow that signal given by the signal person until they receive a stop signal, or, of course, if there's a hazard they have to contend with. If we go to the next slide, we do definitely want to pay attention to the new federal crane standard as well as any state-specific safety standards. OSHA, some states have their own state OSHA plans, so if you're working in any of the states listed here, you definitely want to find out if there's any state requirements that might apply. If we can go to the next slide, some of the signal person qualification information required as of this month, November 2010. A designated signal person knows and understands the types of signals used. They're competent in the application of the type of signals used, has basic understanding of equipment operation and limitations, including dynamics involved in swinging and stopping loads and boom deflection from hoisting loads. Also knows and understands the relevant requirements of the standards listed there. 1926-1419 talks about signals. 1420, radio signals, telephone or electronic transmission of signals. 1421 deals with voice signals. and 1422 is the hand signal chart. So they're familiar with all the requirements there. That's what the training would be based on. They demonstrate that they meet the requirements in this section through a verbal or written test and through a practical test. So training documentation must also specify the type of signaling. So on the cards, the training certification training records, we'd have whether it's hand or radio signals, for example, designated on that training certification record. The standard's also real clear that the documentation must be available at the job site. When we do the signal person training, we issue that training certification record. We also keep a copy for our files and recommend that the employer, that our customer keeps a copy on file, and then we issue a pocket card for the signal person. So the basic goal of the standard, to reduce miscommunication, which can lead to struck by or crushed by injuries and fatalities in the past. So basically, the new federal standard, taking a lot of the old federal information, best industry practices, ASME standards, and trying to put it all in one location for a more user-friendly standard. If we can go to the next slide, look at some additional changes here. Signals, talked about a signal person is provided in each of the following situations. So when we have crane work, when do we have to provide a signal person? You can see there the point of operation, meaning the load travel or the area near or at the load placement is not in full view of the operator, or when the equipment is traveling, the view and the direction of travel is obstructed. So the first two requirements address the hazard of limited operator visibility there. And then also it goes on to say, due to the specific safety concerns, either the operator or the person handling the load determines that it is necessary. So that provision is basically in place to ensure that the signal person is provided when necessary. Also, just like we talked about the state plan requirements, are there certain site requirements we have to contend with? What are your customers' rules and regulations? Many general contractors now, you know, if you go on their project, you're going to have a signal person with any type of crane work that we're involved with. So you got to pay attention to site-specific policies, company policies, what are our customers' rules and regulations. Signals can be hand, voice, audible, or new signals. So in the future, if there's some new signals developed and they meet the requirements of the standards, we can go with those. For now, the two most common would be the hand and the voice signals. Hand signals are in accordance with Appendix A, so we'll go through the basic hand signals coming up towards the end of the presentation. There's an exception to that. If the standard signal is not covered, then the non-standard hand signal can be used if the signal person and the operator and lift supervisor agree on a non-standard hand signal. So the idea is we have the hand signal chart. Majority of operations are going to be covered by those hand signals. If there's some specialized task or activity that's not covered by a specific hand signal, then the operator, the signal person, everyone involved agrees on a new signal ahead of time, and then we can use a non-standard signal. So trying to make everything uniform so everyone's familiar with the standard signals. The hand signal chart must be either posted on the equipment or conspicuously posted in the vicinity of the hoisting operation. So typically posted on the crane, that's the best place for it. That way we always know it's in the work area. New signals, again, can be used if the employer demonstrates the new signals are at least equally as effective as voice, audible, or standard hand signals, or there's a national consensus standard for the new signal when they may be developed. If we go to the next slide, so again, the signal person is required point of operation not in full view of the operator. The view of direction of travel is obstructed, or site-specific safety concerns if it's a site requirement or a job site specific requirement. Types of hand signals, again, hand, voice, audible, also new signals if those are developed in the future. The type of signal, again, specified on that training certification record. So again, the goal of the standard to have a more standardization and still allowing flexibility if there's a special signal that may be needed. If we go ahead and go to the next slide, talking about voice signals here, must contain the following 3 elements given in the following order. So function, such as hoist or boom, direction, distance or speed, function, and then the stop signal. For example, swing right 50 feet, 25 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet, 2 feet, swing, stop. So the operator, a signal person, a lift supervisor, are able to communicate in the language used. They're both speaking the same language, so they understand each other. So they agree prior to the lift on voice signals, all right, and they say, here's how we're going to do the voice signals, and here's the direction, and here's the sequencing of the signals, and then they can go ahead and do that job. They don't have to meet again unless there's a problem with communication, or if they change, another worker is added or substituted, or something comes up during the project, but definitely want to have the meeting ahead of time to agree on the voice signal method. Signal transmission is through a dedicated channel. There's an exception to that if there's one or more crane or derricks and one or more signal person may share a dedicated channel if they're coordinating operations. So this would be to prevent multiple booms or load lines from contacting each other there. Operators' reception of signals are by a hands-free system, so the operator doesn't need to press a button or flip a switch or take his hands to receive that incoming signal. The idea is that he has both hands free to operate the machine. So some key points for the voice signals. One thing would be testing of the device on site prior to the start of the lifting operation to verify the signals are clear and effective and the devices are working properly, they're reliable. So always a good idea to do a dry run with any kind of job. If we're doing a critical lift evaluation, for example, we might have the operators scope out to the maximum radius and boom length and get the parameters, take our tape measures, and make sure we're within capacity for that load chart. Same idea with signals. Before you actually start the lift, the signal person, the operator, gives some signals without a load and make sure everyone's on the same page there. All directions given to the operator by the signal person are given from the operator's perspective. So this means the signal person must give the signals as if they were sitting in the operator's seat and facing the same direction as the operator. So given from the operator's perspective there. If we go to the next slide, one place in the standard is also mentioned, I think we may have skipped a slide on personnel baskets. I just wanted to mention that real quickly. They do talk about hand signals under the personnel platform standard. And if we look at either way, let me just mention it real quickly. If you're using personnel baskets on the project, we want to have those hand signals posted in the basket. And part of the platform standard says occupants keep all parts of their body inside the platform during raising, lowering, and horizontal movement, except when they're giving hand signals, then they can have their hands outside of that basket. So want to be up to speed with any requirements for putting people in the suspended personnel basket and conducting hand signals. It also states that anyone in the basket knows the emergency stop signal if they would have to use that. On the current slide here, signal person qualifications. How do we qualify the signal persons? Really two choices, a third-party qualified evaluator or the employer qualified evaluator. Have to have documentation for both. The difference is the third-party qualified evaluator, that training is portable. We can take it from one employer to the next, and that's basically due to the independence and the expertise of the third-party evaluator. The standard talks a little bit about retraining and reassessment. Basically, if the signal person gives an incorrect signal or they're involved in a near miss or an accident, we'd want to have some retraining and reassessments there. If we go to the next slide, some more information on qualification requirements. So in the beginning, we talked about knowing and understanding the signals, competent in using the signals. basic understanding of crane operation. So again, the limitations of the equipment, what are the load dynamics involved, boom deflection. So the signal person knows how the crane load will move in response to the signals given. That way they can give the most efficient and appropriate signal. So have to know quite a bit about the cranes and the setup and everything involved to give the accurate hand signals, voice signals, whatever we're working with. Verbal or written tests plus a practical exam is required. They allow for verbal testing. A recommendation really, if we're going to do a verbal test, I would document that on the sign-in sheet. So we'd have the topic, the date, signatures of the trainer and attendee, and make a note that it was a verbal exam. Really always prefer to give a written test. That way it's verification of understanding, kept on file, documented that way, but the standard does allow for verbal testing. So again, retraining, we talked about it. If the signal person makes a mistake, acts in a manner that indicates they don't meet the qualification requirements or involved in an incident. If we go to the following slide, these are standard hand signals. Again, this is Appendix A in the current crane standard, federal standard. Just run through some of the basic hand signals here. So stop with arm extended to the side, palm down, arm swing back and forth. So that may be a little different for some of us. A lot of times people make a fist to stop the crane. But again, since there is a stop signal covered in the standard hand signals, we want to get everyone used to and familiar with this standard stop signal. Emergency stop signal, both hands to the side, extended horizontally, palms down, arms swung back and forth. Hoist to cable up, we can see the signal there. So if we want to move that load straight up, we would give the hoist signal. If we give the boom signal, boom up, that load's going to not only move vertically, it will also move laterally. So definitely the crane reacts differently depending on what type of signal is given. Raise boom to boom up, we can see the signal there. Swing, we're facing the machine, whichever direction we want to swing the crane boom, swing that direction. Retract telescope boom to telescope in. Raise the boom and lower the load, so two functions at once there. We're booming up and cabling down at the same time, so we're positioning that load for us. Dog everything, okay, set the brakes, hold the load, dog everything there. Lower to cable down. Lower boom, we're going to boom down. Extend telescoping boom to telescope out. Travel, tower travel, this is primarily for the tower cranes to travel that tower there. On the following page, continues on, lower the boom and raise the load, so we're going to boom down and hoist up at the same time, two functions at once. So again, the signal person has to be very skilled and knowledgeable, just like the crane operator, know when it's appropriate to give the correct signal. Move slowly. If we put our hand over any signal, it means do that signal slowly. So hoist up slowly, boom up slowly. If we put our hand over a signal, we would do that signal slowly. Use auxiliary hoist. If we have a machine that has a main and auxiliary drum on it, we're telling the crane operator, use the auxiliary hoist there. Whenever they have a choice, we designate which hoist line and then whichever function we want to perform. Crawler crane, travel both tracks to move that machine backward or towards us there. Use main hoist this time. We had a choice, and now we're indicating to use the main hoist and then whichever signal we want to perform. Crawler crane, travel one track, so to maneuver a crawler crane, hold one track steady, turn the other to move the carrier, position the carrier there. And trolley travel, really applying to tower and overhead cranes for trolley travel. On the next slide, this comes from the OSHA website, kind of a summary of when a signal person, what kind of training is required that we went over in the presentation here. And then it goes on to qualification. And you can see at the end there how will the employer show that a signal person is qualified, documentation, again, kept, maintained, and available at the work site. When are signal persons required to be qualified? The last item, talks about, again, this month, November 8, 2010. So all the rules and regulations that we're talking about went into effect this month. And if we go to the following slide, that really concludes the PowerPoint here, and if there's any questions at this time.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions that have been asked through the menu bar. If anyone wants to take a moment and ask some questions, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and continue to the next slide and give you Joe's contact information in case after the presentation you want to follow up with him. He can be reached at the email and phone number on your screen. It's Joe DeFranco at earthlink.net or 919-417-2139. Okay, we did just get a question. It says, who governs who are qualified as approved trainers?
The standard didn't go in much into approved trainers. It talks about qualified trainers, and if you read the preamble to the standard, there was a lot of discussion about that. So really, the qualification means the person giving the training has the knowledge, skill, education, and training to be able to deliver the effective training. So there's no certification of trainers, but they have to be a qualified person.
Okay, and who supplies the signal person, the crane company or general contractor?
Yeah, again, there was a lot of discussion about that. It's really based on the job parameters. They didn't specify that it's provided by the crane company every time or the customer, general contractor. All the discussions and the outcomes basically say it's a case-by-case basis, and it's to be worked out on each particular job.
Okay. If an operator is accredited as an operator already, will they need to be signal qualified?
Yeah, and when you look at CCO's website, which is the National Commission for the Certification of Crane Operators, and we happen to do a lot of that type of training, that's one question on their website, and they address it as saying, when the crane operator receives training, yes, we go over hand signals and rigging and all those parameters, but it's really from the operator's perspective. So he's really not qualified as a signal person unless he has a training certification record, documented training as a signal person. So the answer is no. He would have to have that signal person training to give signals from the signal person's perspective.
All right, and one final question. If you have been in the industry for 20-plus years, is there some sort of grandfather rule?
Again, they talked about that when CDAC, the Crane and Derrick Advisory Committee, first was assembled, and OSHA also talked about it as well, and they decided that they weren't going to grandfather people with previous experience. The feeling was if you have all the experience to get the documented training and testing in place, shouldn't take much time and effort. So really got to have updated training, and hopefully with the experienced people, you know, you don't have to spend the amount of time and effort as with others. So that's kind of the interpretation there.
Okay, great. And we do have a couple of more questions. Who is required to verify that the signal person is qualified/certified, and whose responsibility is it?
Well, it depends on the job site and the scope of work, but you know, if there's a general contractor, they'd want to be in tune with all the requirements of site supervisors, operators, riggers, signal persons. Also, the crane operator would be very interested. So really, all parties involved need to check for these qualifications and certifications, and make sure everyone's in an agreement and everyone's trained appropriately.
Okay. And finally, I did have someone ask if there is a PowerPoint available for this, and I will let you all know that I can forward a copy of the PowerPoint to you. I'll probably forward that in a PDF form to make sure that everyone can view it. And also, we are recording the webinar, and it will be added to our YouTube channel. Probably take me about a week to get it edited and uploaded, and I will be sure to send an email out letting everyone know that it's available. Oh, and we have some more questions pop up. Okay, great.
Sure.
Can the crane operator be held responsible in the event of an accident if the signal person is not certified?
Well, you know, when there's an accident, sure, everyone involved is going to be accountable. They're going to look at, you know, the controlling entity. They're going to look at the crane operator, the signal person, the riggers. So, you know, absolutely. And getting back to the previous question, really it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that their people are trained and qualified and certified. So, yeah, anytime there's an accident, certainly we're going to look at everybody involved. You know, the idea is the crane operator and the signal person, they're having the pre-job meetings, they're working together. If the signal person gives a signal the operator doesn't understand, he should certainly stop, you know, what they're doing and have those discussions, and vice versa. So yes, everyone would be accountable.
Okay, and let's see, a couple more popped up here. With regards to the rigger certification, is it referring to lift only or machinery moving as well?
Rigger certification, the standards talk about a qualified rigger again. So there's several options to get that accomplished. And rigging, it's really under the material handling standard is where you find the majority of the information on rigging. But yes, it can be any, you know, mobile, tower crane, overhead crane, chain falls. So when you look at the ASME standards and a lot of the OSHA standards, below the hook lifting devices, we'd reference all of those requirements.
Okay. Is the rigging qualification only if you are assembling a crane?
No, it talks about assembly, disassembly, and then it also talks about operation. So definitely, as well as the assembly, disassembly for crane work in general, and under operations, we would have a qualified rigger.
Okay, and if a contractor does not supply a signal person to the crane operator, but the operator and the proposed non-qualified signal person agree on signals, can the work still proceed?
Standard's pretty clear. They would have to be a qualified signal person. So whoever would be providing the signal person, that employer would be responsible to make sure that it's a qualified signal person. Otherwise, we have, again, the hazard of the struck by, you know, crushing hazards. If this person isn't trained and gives an inaccurate signal, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid.
Okay, one part of the new rule that I read is that operators' certificates of competence have to be renewed every 5 years regardless of the certifying agency's requirement. Example, New York State operator's license is a one-time test with renewal by mail every 3 years or so. How would we comply with OSHA if New York doesn't retest for this license?
Yeah, again, you want to look at all your state requirements. I am familiar with New York State's licensing procedures, but the national certification does specify a 5-year recertification period. The feeling is that the standards, you know, over a 5-year period change significantly, so we would have to have refresher training. Typically, recertification involves a written refresher recertification exam. So, you know, best thing to do is to call the state licensing agency and get in touch with them and see what the requirements would be.
Are there any new inspection maintenance records requirements for the cranes in this new standard?
There's an awful lot of updates for inspections in general, whether we're talking about in the crane world, we typically talk about a daily and an annual inspection. They talk about pre-shift inspections and what are the documentation requirements for monthly inspection and annual inspection. So definitely the new standard, there's a whole section on inspections and maintenance, and we would reference that. And yes, there are new requirements. For example, the monthly inspections, specifies they have to be kept for a 3-month period, which probably we want to keep them much longer than that. Annual inspections, a minimum of 12 months, but again, we probably want to keep those inspection records a good while longer. So I would reference that section of the standard.
How can you become a trainer for signal certification?
Again, it'd be based on your experience, knowledge, education, and training, and that you're a qualified person and you can conduct effective training and document it is basically what the standard talks about.
And what is the price to get a person qualified?
I mean, I could talk about our prices if they want to contact me through my email address or give me a call, but, you know, typically it's a per-person price. And typically when we do signal person qualification, we like to do rigor qualification because really the feeling is if you're doing signaling functions, chances are you're doing rigging and you're involved with it and vice versa. So typically we do a program where we issue a training certification record for a rigger and a signal person, and that documentation would talk about whether it's hand, radio, what type of signals we reviewed.
Okay. Can the certifications be done online, or are you required to perform it in person?
It's always best to do training in person so we can have some hands-on practicals involved, but the standard really doesn't specify how the training is conducted. It talks about what the key topics are. So, you know, there are a variety of ways to accomplish that training, and there's some good CD programs and online training, but typically hands-on and practicals, better to do in-person training.
Okay. What is the line between maintenance and construction in a refinery?
That's always a good question. General industry, when you're looking at a general industry site, if we're working at a chemical plant or a paper mill, they fall under general industry, so that would be the 1910-180 crane standard. Now, if you have a rental company going on to a general industry site and they're performing construction services, now they fall typically under the construction standard, 1926-1400, which is the new standard we're talking about here today. If we have an on-site maintenance staff and they have carry decks and boom trucks, again, typically they're under general industry, but when they start, depends on the type of work and the scope, when they start doing new construction or shutdown work or building, most interpretations classify that as construction work. So the general idea is whatever is the more stringent standard we would recommend going with, since the construction standard has much more detail and information, and really that maintenance service provider, even if they're employed by the company, they're more involved with construction activity, we would follow the construction standard.
Is cable up going to be put on the signal charts?
Cable up would be the hoist up signal that we reviewed, so yes, it is covered.
Okay, it looks like that might be all of our questions. That was great. Oh, wait, here's another one. Oh, I don't think this one is completed. Mike, if you could give me a little more information on that question, maybe give him a moment to see if there's a little more information. No? Okay, I think that's all of our questions for now. If, as I mentioned, oh, here's another one. Is it mandatory to have a signal person on all crane lists?
No, just under the 3 key areas that we talked about is when it's required. So in essence, if the operator is making a lift and he can see that lift, it's in constant full view, he's taking a piece and lifting it from point A to B and there's no obstructions, the standard really says that a signal person is not required. But again, a lot of sites and a lot of general contractors now are going to say, you know, as the subcontractor, as the person performing the work, you're going to have a signal person for every lift. So those are the things we would look for.
All right. Great questions, everyone. This has been fantastic. I hope that Joe's been able to answer all of your questions today, and that you go away with this with some really better understanding of the changes. And if you have any follow-up, please do not hesitate to contact Joe. You can also contact us here at Allied. Jeff's information is on the screen for you. You can visit our previous webinars and keep an eye out for this webinar at our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/AlliedInsurance. And I will be sure to let you all know when this webinar is edited and available for you to share with coworkers and anyone else that you think might benefit from this. So thank you so much for joining us. It was a great webinar, great questions, and we hope that you'll join us for future webinars. So stay safe, everyone. Thank you.